Welcome to Entrepreneur Voices, the IEC podcast, where entrepreneurs and business leaders share their insights and success stories. In today's episode, host Renee Oswald sits down with David Noack, Regional Director for the Eastern Idaho Small Business Development Center. They will explore various funding options for small businesses and share practical advice for navigating the financial landscape. Let's get started.
Welcome. We're so glad to have you here today with us. Thank you, David, for joining us. As a reminder, I'm Renee Oswald, and I'm the host of the Entrepreneur Voices podcast. So, Dave, we're sitting down to visit with you today. Tell us a little bit about you, what your role is, and then we'll kind of jump into some more details about that.
That sounds good. I'm very passionate about what I do. I'm the director of the Small Business Development Center and regional director, and I've been working in 9 counties here in Idaho over the past probably 24 years in that position. And I've worked with over 3,000 companies personally and 450 student teams through that process, and I've learned a ton. But I've got a background in business, quite a background on my end, and I got to the point one day where everything aligned, and I ended up switching gears and starting to work on helping others through that process of trying to find success.
So tell us a little bit about that background. Like, what led you to the SBDC? Why was that even of interest to you?
It's funny because I initially graduated with a landscape design and nursery management degree.
Oh, yeah, okay.
I'm not doing that. I ended up starting out, and I had done construction while I was going to school, and I figured out a way to work my way through college framing houses. And after I got done with my degree, there's stories behind all this, but when I got done basically with the degree, I ended up finding a position to start off in Seattle, the Seattle area, and moved up there, and that's where I got my roots and started moving forward. After a couple of years with the pest control company I was working with, I was making minimum wage, and here I graduated, and I'm going, I can't survive on this.
Not supposed to work like that, huh?
No.
Yeah.
So I ended up turning around and figuring out how to launch my own company in a different region, and it ended up becoming one of the largest in the state in that area at that time. And I learned a lot through that. Going through that process, I always want to learn how to fly. Got my pilot's license, bought an airplane, ended up buying a fledgling aircraft manufacturing company. And I turned around and we took that and got top ratings in the industry over the next few years. And I had a construction company I started, so I was running all 3 at the same time. There was a lot of lessons learned, a lot of mistakes made. And so basically the bottom line was I had a relationship where one of the investors came on board in a way that I found out he was working on hostile takeovers. And
you'd built this business to something that he wanted to take over, huh?
Well, I don't know exactly what all his motives were, but that's kind of a pattern that I discovered, which I didn't know beforehand. I didn't do enough research.
Yeah.
But he was a nice guy in a lot of ways, but what happened was I lost almost everything. He came after everything I had.
Wow.
We ended up turning that around as time went on. I won't get into the story, but it was amazing because I had people contacting us because they knew we were upside down. We were just days away from bankruptcy. And we turned the whole thing around, and he turned around, and when we turned it around, I had people contact me. How in the world did you pull that off? We need help.
Okay,
and that's how I got
it.
into business consulting. So I went back east and spent a few months working with a company and helped them turn around, and I started working on turnaround projects off of things that we learned and things that I'd learned, and then I found out about this position after I'd moved back to the Rexburg area and applied for the position, and the rest is history, I guess.
Yeah, as they say. Do you feel like when you were learning how to, or going through the process of turning that business around, was that really intentional, or were you just kind of lucky?
It was survival.
Yeah, you just did what you had to do, huh?
Oh, it was amazing, and I remember getting to the point where I knew I was going under, and I had a powerful feeling I needed to go down to the bookstore and look for anything to give me some ideas, because I didn't have time to go back to school and learn how to turn a business around. And I found one that was transformational in helping me reground, and within 6 weeks I started working on the turnaround process. And instead of bankruptcy within a year and a half, we were at 6-digit income, and I was working, instead of 16, 18 hours a week, I was working 1 to 1.5 hours a day on average at the most. And it was stunning. I got it to where I was systems driven instead of people driven so much.
Yeah. Well, it's funny what we do when we're like pushed up against a wall, right? When you just have to make things work, all of a sudden things, what do they call it? What do they say? Desperation is the mother of invention, or something like that.
Yes.
Like, isn't that the truth?
Amen.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you were well prepared then to help other businesses go through what they had to go through, so that you were positioned when you got that role at the SBDC to really kind of help other organizations. Is that true?
Oh, yeah. It was fascinating, because before I started there, I went back east in Tennessee, and I worked with a company there for about 9 months. And it was stunning. They were multi-millions of income, but when they turned around, they were on the verge of bankruptcy. And it was how things were operated, how they were managed and run, and so forth. And they were phenomenal. Mm-hmm. But we figured out how to reapply things, and within just a matter of days after we did a new release of approach they used on their marketing, it just went viral. Instead of 1 or 2 orders a week, they got 500 within a month, and it was stunning watching the turnaround take place. So I knew the principles were working.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And then I found out about this position because I was living here at the time, and that's how I got into it.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the SBDC. What does SBDC even stand for?
Small Business Development Center, and it's a federal program. It's a partnering organization of the SBA, Small Business Administration, and we have the SBA, the Small Business Development Center. A third of their funding approximately comes from the SBA, a third comes from the state of Idaho, and a third comes from our host institution in our region, which is Idaho State University. So we also have some funding coming from the federal government contracting program that's called APEX. And so those are sources that give us the income that we need to help support the businesses and so forth. But it's an amazing program. The number one goal is to empower businesses to succeed, or to elevate them to higher levels of success. And so everything we do is focused on that, whether it's marketing, management, funding, organizational, team building, strategic planning. It doesn't make a lot of difference what the needs are. There's a way to either connect them with other resources or tap into tools and resources we have internally.
And do you have to be like a certain size of a business or in a certain place within creating your business in order to work with the SBDC?
No. The program is no cost. Basically, they're in a situation where the services are provided that way because it's a funded organization. But they can be from startup, somebody that's considering going into business, all the way up to multimillion-dollar operations and everything in between. But a lot of it's business planning, business modeling, trying to figure out how to organize things where they're at right now as to where they want to and where they want to go next. And then what we do is help map out a pathway and then just guide through the process and kind of mentor through that process.
Yeah, I imagine, and just in my limited exposure to business, those principles are very transferable. So it doesn't matter whether you're running an automotive repair shop or manufacturing some technological kind of thing. The business principles are still the same. Is that true?
Oh, amen. That's called wisdom.
Yeah.
And that comes from experience. But it's fascinating because the principles apply across the board. And what I discovered that shocked the socks off me, shouldn't have, because I started off the same way. Most people that go into business never graduated with a business degree. They didn't get trained that way. And I tell people when I was a flight instructor, it really hit me one day that a lot of times when people are getting into business, it's like learning how to fly.
Literally.
Yeah. But here you're climbing into your business, your airplane, and you have no training, no experience, and you want to be successful. And what's the odds of a pilot surviving, somebody that just buys an aircraft? And I kind of started out that way on my end, and what a stunner that was for learning.
It really meant a lot to you because that was both pathways just were so parallel for you probably.
Oh, yeah. So on the business plane, the key thing is with most people, if they don't understand that they don't know, they may know how to run the business, the aspects of technology or the technician stage. They know how to build houses. They know how to do daycare.
Yeah.
But running a bit, so I tell people that if you're in business or you're thinking about going in business, it's kind of like just because you know how to build the best design and build the best 747 on the planet doesn't make you a pilot. Running a business is a different hat than knowing how to build a house. There's a whole different pathway. And so what we try to do is help them understand what they don't know that they need to know, or how to help them tap into resources, things that can back them up. So that's basically where our focus is just trying to help them. You've never flown before. Let's go through this process. And so when people go to school and they graduate with a degree in anything, if they don't have experience, they may have the academics, but they don't have the hands-on. And that's where if you have a mentor or a program or somebody that can help you walk and navigate through that, it's so powerful.
Well, and one thing I found too, I think, for the listeners, they might not know, my career primarily was in healthcare. I was a nurse I still am a nurse, but was in a hospital setting for 27 years. So when I stepped away from that and came to our business, I felt like such a fraud. Like everyone around us knew how to do a business, and I don't know how to do a business. My husband, he was a really good technician, and now he's trying to run this business. And what the great thing is I found out is really none of us know what we're doing. We're just all trying to do the very best that we can. And so tapping into some of these principles and resources are so key, and quit pretending like we know what we're doing. You don't have to pretend. There's resources and things out there for you to be able to tap into.
Amen. And the thing that struck me was the more I discovered, the more I learned, the more I find, the less I know.
Oh, so much, yeah.
There's nobody that knows everything, not even the Bill Gateses of the world.
Right. They have good people around them.
They have a team. Mm-hmm. They have people that can fill in, and they work together in amazing ways. And so, at any rate, those are some of the key things right out of the gate.
Hey, listeners. We hope you're enjoying today's episode of Entrepreneur Voices. This episode is brought to you by Oswald Service and Repair, the trusted name in automotive repair and service since 1939. Learn more about how Oswald Service and Repair can keep your car happy and healthy at oswaldserviceinc.com.
And one of the things with businesses I've discovered, there's a major mistake most of them make.
And what's that?
Not teachable.
They know everything.
They think they know everything. Mm-hmm. And, I know how to build houses. I just need to know how to do the marketing, I just need a little bit of help on this. And we discovered they need to take a step back and look at the big picture.
Yeah. Well, that's humbling to be able to look in the mirror and be able to say that about yourself.
Oh, yes. And so one of the absolute key things I like to do right out of the gate is just, where are you at on how much do you really want this? Or are you willing to look at things a little bit more in depth? And I have a little scenario I use on how to do that, but it's amazing watching how
it changes their mind.
And I found out it doesn't make any difference what business people are in. If you ask enough questions and you drill down, you can find out what they don't know as you get deeper into it, or where we lack and so forth. And all of us are lacking somewhere.
Yeah.
Bill Gates, I don't even know if he knows how to program a computer, but he
knew how to hire people that makes it happen. So let's talk a little bit about funding, because that really is one of the areas of interest, especially around the SBDC. Question first, though. When I think about the SBDC, I think about, in Idaho Falls, there's the Innovation Center. So how does the SBDC work with the Innovation Center, or are they one and the same?
They're different, but we work together. The Innovation Center is a place where businesses can come, they get established, they can start and launch there and so forth. So it's kind of like an incubator.
Yeah.
And that's basically where its purpose was. What they did in the early days was they realized they needed some resources to help businesses succeed or to help guide them and coach them along the way, especially with the startup businesses. And so the SBDC came into the picture and they gave them free rent if you would help provide trainings and so forth. And so that's how it initially started. And it's been quite an interesting, nice relationship since then. And so that's kind of the center hub. So I think there's probably about 50 businesses based at their facilities right now that are startups. And usually after 1 or 2 years, 3 years, they graduate and they go off on their own kind of a thing. And so they have a bit of turnover there.
But if I have questions about my funding and stuff, you are the guy to come to.
Yeah, and we don't actually provide funding, but what we do is we help people get prepared and connect with it and understand different resources they can go to. I'm on a bank board, a non-traditional bank fund board, and so forth. And so I've been on the receiving end of capital for companies, when I was receiving funding, but I've also been on the other end preparing and helping people go through that process. And there's some key things to understand, some big mistakes companies make when they're trying to go for funding, things they don't understand.
Well, let's talk about some of those. What are the different types of funding that would be available to a startup or even an existing business?
Yeah, one of the key things right out of the gate, there's 2 major types of approach to funding. One of them is debt and the other is equity. And so debt and equity funding, debt, you go borrow money, you pay interest on it and so forth, you pay it back, but you own all the IP, the intellectual property, the stock in the company, so to speak. When somebody goes to equity funding, they're looking for somebody that'll help invest in the company, but they give up part of the company and they don't have to pay things back necessarily. And so there's 2 major different approaches. And a lot of people, they want funding, but they don't realize what they need to do to prepare to attract the attention of funding agencies or organizations or investors. And it's basically all very similar.
Well, wait a minute. What I hear you saying then is I can't just say, hey, I think this would be a good business and walk into a bank and they would give me money?
Boy, it sounds like you've got some experience.
Well, that doesn't happen? Like what? Tell me about that.
Oh, that's typically the way a lot of people think. They think I've got a great idea, I've got a great product or service. And so what happens if I go to the bank and it sounds good enough and they're going to give me money?
Well, you're right.
But that's not how it works. And there's a whole process that the banks look at things very differently than we do. They're in the business. A lot of people say, what is a bank in the business of? Loaning money. They're in the business of making money.
Yeah.
And so what they want to do is they don't want to just invest in something that they think sounds good. They want to make sure that it's a risky, not so risky that it's
of a risk.
Not so much of a risk. And here's what's fascinating. When people go to get a loan on a house, what's the odds of getting funding? Way easier than it is for business.
Right.
And one of the reasons why is because when they go for a home funding, they've got equity and they probably have a job. So they have a proof of income. Mm-hmm. When you start a company, you have to prove you're going to have sales. And if you give up your other job, you have no guaranteed income necessarily. So if this business doesn't work, it's a double jeopardy for the bank. A home with somebody that's got a paycheck is a whole lot less risky than a business where they're giving up a job or where they may be. And so there's
it seems like a no-win then. Like if I have to stop my job, I have to quit my job in order to start this other business, but they're not going to give me money in order to start the business. So how does that even happen? How do people even get started?
Well, that's where most of them miss the golden opportunity to tap into resources to help guide them through the process. And so how do I get staged? How do I pique the interest? How do I win at getting funding and so forth? And I've got some phenomenal stories, but what's interesting is if they understand that and they realize don't just go to the bank looking for money because you only get one chance to make a good first impression. What you want to do is go and be prepared, and when you go, but the first trip I make to the bank is not to ask for funding. I don't bring them in my business plan. the first trip I make to the bank or anybody is to sit down and learn more about the funder and the sources and what types of things they fund for, what they don't want to see, what challenges. Interview your bank. They interview you, interview your bank.
So what I think I hear you saying is that each bank may have a different interest. So in my case, a bank may be interested in automotive repair, whereas another bank is more interested in farming. And so make sure that I'm looking at who I'm asking to lend to me and make sure they're a right fit for myself.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
And so there's some real key things here. But that's 100% right on track. So I'm not going to say more about it.
Oh, okay. What other ways then? You talked about equity. So obviously, there's debt. I can get that from the bank. There's also the small business administration. Mm-hmm. So is that like working with a bank?
The SBA, basically, they don't loan money for the most part. Basically, what they do is they guarantee loans that are made by banks and so forth. There's different ways that it's approached. So the SBA is a support, and if you go for an SBA loan, it usually takes more paperwork. There's more to it, but it's less risky for the bank because if things don't go right, the bank's not left holding 100% of the debt that got dumped in their lap, so to speak. The SBA will come in. So there's more stringent standards to it, but it's easier for a bank to survive. And if we get into more challenging times like down economy or whatever, banks don't want that much risk. So there's a whole shift taking place.
It minimizes their risk.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what I understand too is that a small business administration loan, you don't have to come in with as much down. And so that's probably because the bank isn't taking as much risk. Is that right?
Yeah, there's a lot more preparation and so forth. And it depends on the type of loans. There's 8A loans, there's 504 loans, there's different approaches that they have, and there's some smaller things that can be done. But understanding what the options are, what I really need for my company, what my and so forth makes all the difference in how I stage and prepare what I'm going to bring in. How I present to one bank, the pitch may be very similar, but some of the preparation and the things that I provide and the way that I share it is focused on what their interests are and helping to help the bank in their angles and so forth. So part of what I do, I don't go to the bank and find out what I need to learn to get money. One of my goals when I first go to the bank is go to the bank and understand why they're loaning money. What are they after? Mm. If I can help them get what they want, they'll help me get what I want if I can make it align better.
Well, I imagine not very many business owners actually do it that way.
No, and that's where they miss some golden opportunities. And I've got all kinds of tools and resources to help a company based on who they are, where they're at, that can help walk through that process.
Yeah. Well, I think that sounds so key because just like you've already indicated, many of us are great clinicians, technicians, whatever. We think, well, we can do this better than the person we're working for. And that's like the 10th step. That's, that's way down the road. Like there's some other things we need to be thinking about way in the beginning before we even think about starting a business.
Oh, yeah. And here's some statistics. And I've seen different ones from different angles, but one of them that I saw came from Inc. magazine or whatever. Another one came from the SBA, but generally 50% to 80% of the businesses within the first 5 years are sunk. They're gone. Wow. So most people that start a business fail.
Yeah.
When they get to the 10-year mark, I saw one study where a key study that was 70 or 93% of the businesses are under at the 10-year mark. And does that mean that the last 7% are doing well? Not by any means.
They might just be making it, huh?
They might just be making it. So how do you stack the odds in their favor? What can we learn from those who are winning? Not just somebody who's in business necessarily, but how do they win? How do they get to the top and so forth?
Those are staggering statistics to me. Like how do we have any businesses in business if that's really what's going on out there?
Well, here's what's fascinating. You're doing it.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of that was luck. I think many of us in business kind of do get a little bit lucky. And we also have a good foundation of principles that that we were able to build off of from Kevin's grandfather who started the business. So that was in our benefit. But I do think that culture and values really create that strong foundation.
Very, very good points. The one thing that I want to reiterate on what you just barely said there that is phenomenal. A lot of people call things luck, and it's like you have a neighbor that's got a garden. Oh, they got a green thumb. They've never been to school. They've never been trained. They just happen to be doing those things that are working well. And so, or working correctly. It's not necessarily that they have a green thumb. It's that they are doing things in a way that work.
Yeah.
And so what you do, if you think it's accidental, there may be all kinds of reasons why, but how you approach what you're doing makes all the difference. And so you're doing things, I can guarantee you that businesses I see fail are not doing in a lot of cases. And so when it comes to culture and all that, that's all critically important. But there's more to the story. And that's why if you can get a mentor, get somebody to help you walk through the process, it's so much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. I truly believe in that too. And that's one of the things that we have really been fortunate with, is to have some people smarter than us helping step us through some of those things. All right, well, talk to me a little bit about what should small businesses do to prepare, before they approach potential investors, other than just, looking at those investors and understanding what they want. What do I need to have? Is it important to have a business plan? Do I have to have that written up? That seems so daunting.
When it comes to business planning, I sat on the board with a key investment group that was in the Idaho Falls area. They had a $20 million loan fund, and people brought in business plans all the time. And I was stunned what he told me. I'm so sick of business plans.
Really?
He said, show me your business model. I want to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, why. And it's really funny because you can't even write a business plan effectively unless we understand a model that goes behind it. And so the Empire State Building, when they first built that, we didn't have computers like we do now. But if somebody went out and started talking about how great this was, and they had some kind of a plan or whatever, and they showed it on paper even, they mapped out and showed what this building was going to look like. Oh, that's nice. But guess what? If they had a round table like this one here, and they turn around and they put a model together, they put it in the middle of the table, people can walk around and look at it from different angles. Now they've got a visual.
Yeah.
And it's so much more powerful than trying to explain to my wife what this building is going to look like and how big it's going to be and so forth. And so when you're doing a business model, my first thing is model it out, strategically plan it. And there's tools that we have. One of them is called the Business Model Canvas. It's got 9 segments in it. And one core thing is the number one part of the model is the customer. The second most important part is how we help them get what they want or what they need. And that's the business unique value proposition. What do we have that's unique?
What problem can we solve?
How can we help them solve what their interests and their problems are?
Yeah.
So we walk them through a modeling process before they even waste their time writing a plan. The plan is one of the last things we do that I recommend they do. I like to sit down at the whiteboard and, what are you doing? Model the whole thing out. Tell me how you're going to do this, because talking is one thing, but getting to the point where we literally start mapping out how it's going to work. When you start putting pen to paper, it makes you think about things that don't make sense.
Yeah.
How do I put this in words?
Yeah.
There's a whole process I use.
Dave, do you end up talking people out of doing businesses?
Nope.
You don't?
They talk themselves out.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding.
I wonder, because it feels a little bit like, if I ask myself all those questions, I have to actually be able to answer them, and it's just easier to dream. And maybe that's why 50% of them go out of business. Actually,
I think almost anybody that is real passionate could be successful if they align their thinking and everything. How many of us here, when we were born, knew how to put our shoes on, kind of a thing?
Yeah, right.
We all learn as we go through. Anybody can learn almost if they have any kind of an aptitude at all, which most people do. It's just a matter of, am I willing to walk down the road to success the way that the top 5% do, or do I want to do it the top 7%, or do I want to learn it the hard way? And so if we use those that have experience, it makes it so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about equity, private equity. Sometimes they get a bad rap because they want to take a percentage of your business. What has been your experience in businesses deciding to go with private equity?
I started off with one of those one day, and it almost drilled me under, but they're phenomenal. I just didn't know how to approach it right.
Uh-huh.
And so, and finding the right partnering group to work with. So one of the key things, it doesn't make any difference if people go for bank funding or if they go for equity funding, finding an investor or somebody. And there's different types of equity investing. There's everything from angel investing up to venture capitalists and so forth.
And let's just explore that a little bit. Angel investing is not looking for a portion of your business, is that?
Oh yeah, that can be very well a part of the whole picture. In fact, that's typically
But they're not hands-on. They're kind of in the background.
They can be hands-on. It just depends on how they approach it, what their interests are. That's why I like to interview or understand who I'm going to. So before I ever go talk to them and start asking questions, I like to go online. I like to ask people I've worked with them that understand the process. Before I go to a bank, I want to know who they are, how they operate. Mm-hmm. That's one of the biggest mistakes companies make is they don't understand their funder. Mm-hmm. They just come in with a thing they think's a great idea, and
they're happy somebody will give them money.
They're happy that somebody will even listen to them.
Yeah.
And when they go in there, they only get one chance to make a good first impression. So my thought is, before you go in, learn, do an analysis on the funding partner that you're working with. Okay. And then I know how to better stage things. But no matter who I'm working with on funding, I still have to go through setting up my business model to attract interest and attention from a bank, a funder of any type or whatever. It's the same basic process.
Yeah, it sounds like you have some fantastic resources to be able to think that out, things that a clinician or a technician or whoever that would be would not necessarily even think about.
Yep. And today, it's harder to get funding than it was 3 years ago.
Why?
And we're in different times. And when the economy tightens up, the banks tighten up. Mm-hmm. And they're doing less loans to smaller businesses and more loans to bigger companies that are more solid and stable and so forth. Mm-hmm. So if I'm going to a bank, there's some things I need to understand if I want to get their attention. But those are only two sources. I've got a whole list of sources where things that they can consider completely, and I call it non-traditional loan funding.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
So part of it is if people don't know their options, they don't have any, is what I tell them. If you don't know your options, you don't have any. They may be there. It's just not to me because they're not in my mind and not in my thinking process. So there's debt and equity funding. There's angel investors, capital investors, strategic partners, foundations, fools, friends, and families, usually where most people like to start.
Yes.
Referrals, credit cards, refinancing, restructuring, downsize to upgrade. I've got so many techniques people can use to consider. Selling assets, borrowing against cash value of life insurance policies, home equity lines. I'm skipping tons of it here. There's funding partner funding, where somebody comes in as a partner, not just an investor, but and they're willing to participate as one of the key drivers in the business. Accounts receivable factoring, crowdfunding, co-signers, peer-to-peer grants, microloans. I could go on and on.
Yeah, so there's
a whole slew of options.
You brought up something there that was that we didn't know when we were building our location here in Rexburg was about a grant. Like we had no idea that we would even qualify for a grant. You know, my experience with that would not be that we would be in that position, but we found out because we qualified for some rural expansion. I can't even remember what the grant was, that it helped us with, we purchased a undeveloped lot and they helped us with some of the infrastructure of developing that. From farmland to us to being able to have commercials there. So we were able to tap into some grant funding that I had no idea I didn't know that it existed. How do we know about these things?
Start talking to people, ask questions, come to organizations like the SBDC or other organizations that may know about it. The IEC, there's a lot of different resources where they can start talking. And if we don't open our mouth, we're just left to our own intuition. And if we don't have that training and understanding, we're missing golden opportunities. So my thought is right out of the gate, talk to people
Go
that are
talk
in
to
the
somebody.
know, find out who's in the know, and then touch base and learn how you can learn more. I don't even recommend going to a bank until people start looking at a 5,000-foot view. What options are available? If I go to the bank, is that my best option right out of the gate? And if so, if I understand what the others are, when I go to the bank, if I'm more confident, and that confidence comes across with the banker, and they can see that I've got a great plan, great team, and great approach here and so forth.
They're more likely to listen to you, huh?
And most people, instead of being desperate to get the loan, they're more comfortable, more relaxed. And when they're sitting in front of the banker, they know they've got other options and so forth. And so they don't get so stressed, and that doesn't come across. I could tell you some amazing stories.
I think one of the things that I have heard from other individuals who maybe are starting businesses, especially ones that are a little more original or maybe aren't already in the area, is that they're scared to talk to people because maybe somebody will steal their idea. So how do you allay those fears?
Well, first thing I do is don't say anything that you have to be afraid of losing, kind of a thing. When I go to the banker, I don't have to dig in and tell him what my thoughts are in my first interview. I'm generally planning on, we're getting prepared to launch our construction company or take it to a new level and so forth. But before we presented a business plan or anything, I just wanted to touch base with you and get a little bit of insight from your perspective. Is this something you do as a bank? Is this one of your focuses? Could it be? What are some of the biggest things that you're looking for? What are some of the biggest mistakes? Oh my gosh, I can turn around and take that information. I go out in the car, I take a tape recorder, write down immediately what I learned. I'll take that information and I'll go, okay, as I'm doing my business plan and my pitch and my executive summary, I want to make sure that I'm focusing and addressing this to the interest of the investor. Put an angle in there or in a cover letter. And so there's a process we can use. We can stack the odds in our favor so much more powerfully.
It feels daunting. You know, if I was presented with that, you know, and I'm just barely germinating on an idea and I'm worried about leaving my job, what you just explained seems like, oh, I couldn't do that. Like do you coach people to help them get to that level of comfort?
Oh yeah. And it's actually quite simple. The first thing to do is to just take it, to look at the big picture, get the 5,000-foot view, then drill down on the steps. Once we get the steps, we go to the first step. And I'll go, okay, the first thing I want to do is understand my industry. Before I ever even consider going to the bank, I need to understand the markets, the industry, and so forth, not just from my perspective, but from outside perspectives. And so research. 40%, I went to a conference one day and I was stunned. 40% of a good business plan is nothing more than sheer research. Mm-hmm. And that's done on the front end, most of it.
Well, and it would feel like I think you have said, and maybe I'm just repeating in a different way, is as you gain your level of confidence around the business that you're creating or growing, then it becomes more of a conversation like you and I are having with whoever that might be that is in a position to give you money.
I can tell you've got some wonderful experience.
I've been around a while, Dave.
Oh, yeah, it's seasoned experience.
Yeah, it's come with some gray hairs, I will tell you. Are there different challenges because we're in a rural environment, or are there different opportunities because we're in a rural environment?
Yeah, every area is different. If I go to Pocatello, it's a little different. If I go to Idaho Falls, if I go to California, we just learn the culture of the area and what resources are available. The basic principles of business stay the same, but the resources could be very different in some ways.
Mm-hmm. And you're the expert that would be able to help us with that.
Yep. So one of the key things right out of the gate, before you even start doing a business, gather information. Do the simple stuff. Go out and do some basic research. Then sit down and whiteboard out, and I recommend using Business Model Canvas or something like that. Whiteboard out who your customer segments are, what your unique value proposition is, how you can help them, what cash flow revenue streams, how you connect with your audience, how you or how you discover your audience, what are the passions and the interests of the market. Oh, that's the biggest mistake most companies make right out of the gate. Mm-hmm. They sell features. They don't sell benefits. Features describe what you're doing. I build houses and so forth. But benefits are what they do for the customer. So most businesses are selling up in their mind. They're logically explaining what they do.
Your heart.
Most customers buy from the heart. And if we're not making that connection, I call it congruent marketing. Does it make logical sense and does it feel right? And if I don't understand that about my markets, that's the first mistake companies make right out of the gate. They're approaching things in a way that's not going to give them a winning market strategy very well.
Yeah.
That I've seen in most cases. And so what happens, we walk them through the process, map it out now, and it's amazing how the lights start going on. Oh, yeah, you can build houses. Who are you building them for?
Yeah, right. Let's tap into the heart. Well, Dave, you have given us a lot to think about, a lot of great information. As we're wrapping up, are there any other thoughts around funding or that type of, or the type of resources maybe that SBDC can provide specifically around funding, but also to other things that we haven't talked about?
Well, when it comes to funding, there's two things that I'll mention. One of them is on the business planning process. Business model first, the business plan second is what I recommend. I like to help businesses understand what a bank is looking for. Typically, I talked to one banker and he said he gets sometimes 15 to 25 business plans a day.
Wow.
If there's 20 pages to a business plan, that's like reading a book a day. He doesn't have time to do it. Mm-hmm. So guess what they do? If you take the business plan and you rip out the executive summary and throw the business plan away, and all you have is that executive summary, that page and a half, maybe 2 pages at the most, if they're not sold at that point on wanting to drill down, they're not going to look at the rest of it.
Okay.
So what most people do, what most bankers do, is they'll look at the executive summary. Guess what the next most important thing they look at is?
What?
They go back to the financials. Does this make financial sense? Then guess what they do? They typically go back to the team. Who can pull this off? Do we trust they can do it? They work backwards. Then they get into the marketing. But most companies, when they go to the bank, the big mistake they make is this is the greatest market ever, ... It's proof we're going to be successful. It doesn't work that way. Mm-hmm. And so if people understand the banking, how bankers review that, if they're not sold in your pitch to even want to look at the rest of it and look at the finances, and then there's a process they go through. So my thought is, another key thing that I want to mention, we're not in normal times right now when it comes to business. You can't go down and get a business loan as easy, and if you can get a business loan, the interest rates are higher. So, and there's different ways to operate, and most people in business don't understand that the markets shift when the economy shifts. And so if they don't understand how they're shifting, they can make major mistakes, and the bankers want to feel confident that whether the markets pivot one way or the other, that the company is able to accommodate that. And so we have a deal we call business strategies for challenging times. Oh my. When a company starts getting challenged, and I've talked to some in Rexburg right down the street, their restaurant businesses are going down and others are coming in and succeeding. What are they doing differently? Mm-hmm. And so I get to the why level of everything. And that's what I recommend is learn your options, understand, and it doesn't have to be complex. The simple way to do it is just to get connected with a mentor that understands to help guide them through the process. You don't have to go it alone. That's the big key lesson, is just tap into others that are in the know and know how to make it work and so forth. It's that simple. Just get mentored through the process and then just take it a step at a time.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that is an excellent way to wrap all of this up, because that is the main message that I have learned through experience, and what you've also taught us today is you are not alone, and there are a lot of resources out there, and they are provided, like you're just waiting for people to come in so you can help them with all of this stuff. It feels daunting. It feels a little bit scary, and that's why you have somebody to help hold your hand. And again, you don't have to fake it till you make it. Like, there's definitely a team behind you to help you be successful. So let's tap into them and use the SBDC and all the other resources that are out there for us. And anyway, I just appreciate your time today. Thank you, Dave, for imparting all of your knowledge on us and helping us especially understand the financial options that small businesses have. And I just recommend to our listeners that they need to come in and see you, ask you questions. You're there for them. Where can they find you?
We're online. They can just look up Idaho SBDC and Small Business Development Center, and that'll take them right right to the website, and then they can just navigate through that.
Okay, great. We'll tap into that resource. Thanks again, Dave, for your time today. We appreciate you being here.
Oh, I'm excited. And by the way, the reason I'm doing this, I love watching others succeed. When they're successful, it's like a mother raising a child that succeeds. They get so excited. At least that's what I've seen.
Yeah, great. Well, let's change the statistic for East Idaho, especially on how these businesses are going to survive over time. Go and see Dave.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Entrepreneur Voices. We hope you gained valuable insights from David Noack's expertise. Thanks for being a part of our community.